Alright, it's time to take a look at the Gurista pirate faction frigate. This is the Worm. Now the Worm might be one of the most rare faction frigates that you will encounter in space. The most popular are the Dramiel, Daredevil, Succubus, even the Garmer, but the Worm is a little bit rare nowadays. However, the Worm is a very interesting little boat, and I have to say that this nanocore looks pretty awesome. It is about the same nanocore that I had on the Dramiel, I believe. Now let's quickly take a look at the basic info at the trait description. Roll bonus plus 200% small drone damage, plus 200% small drone effective hit points. Advanced small drone operation bonus will give you plus 10% small drone damage, plus 1 kilometer drone command range. And the advanced read command bonus will give you plus 10% missile torpedo kinetic damage, plus 10% missile torpedo thermal damage, and plus 4% shield resistance. The Worm has 2 drones, 2 high slots, 3 medium slots, 3 low slots, 3 combat, and 3 engineering rigs. 4561 is the defense. The Worm is a shield tank, don't armor tank the Worm. A pretty good capacitor, 158 gigajoules, 240 seconds is the recharge time, 8.94 gigajoule per second is the recharge rate. It can lock 5 targets, a decent scan resolution, and a pretty good sensor strength. 29.4 is the signature radius, and of course the Worm is definitely not the fastest faction frigate, but the Worm should be one of the more tanky ones. So I have 467.41 DPS with this current build. I have the small missile launchers. They have a 19.8 kilometer range. Overall pretty good stats. Dual weapons, 1 disruptor, 1 warrior, and 1 Imperial Navy acolyte. 40 kilometer is the drone command range, and the drones are also very fast. A micro updrive, medium extender, and a adaptive shield hardener. This is a passive tank, long-range kite PvP build, although it can also be used for PvE. After all, this little boat can do a speed tank and a classic DPS setup for the combat rigs, dual auxiliaries, and 1 power grid router on the engineering rigs. Now I have the Worm Hare Calamity core, a very unique core, and I think this core is about the same level as the Lucifer core on the Dramiel. I picked the 30% extra drone damage. Now, of course, you can pick any core you like. Now, only the Voyager core has the same drone damage bonus. The other cores have a 18% increase, but the Calamity and the Voyager core have the 30% drone damage increase, but again, any core that you pick should be okay. 12,224 is the defense. The ship has a 20% bonus on all shield resistance from the skills. 2 minutes and 43 seconds is the capacitor. 637.20 meters per second is the afterburner speed. Now for the rigs, this is going to be interesting because you can use the bombard. I recommend that you use the bombard implant on the Gurista pirate ships. You can use the automatic defense, also a pretty good implant. Now if you like missiles, well, if you don't have the drone implant, then the missile implants can work, but it is recommended that you go with the drone implant on this boat or on any Gurista pirate ship. The units are for tank, afterburner speed, and a unit for the shield booster to increase the shield boost amount per cycle. And let's undock and let's take a look at the active stats of this ship. Now again, the Worm should be one of the tankiest little boats, tankiest frigates, that is. And the second tankiest would be the Astro on armor tank. Okay, and now the Worm has 1 extra slot over here, which is very nice. That's because of the drones. Again, a very nice touch to the module layout. 16,552 defense, 3.9 kilometers per second with the afterburner, which is, you know, not bad. It's fairly fast, although the other faction frigates might be faster. Only the Cruer is slower than this one. 467.01 DPS. That stays the same, because the bombarding plant still doesn't show you the paper DPS on the fitting window. Now the next build is the build with the small torpedo launchers, a scrambler, and an afterburner. This is a close range brawler build. Can work against big ships that can't track, and you have this fit as well. A active tank with a medium shield booster. Also works if you are orbiting the target at 0, primarily against big ships. And well, you can slap the medium rapid missiles on the worm, and this is a kite build. With the medium missiles you do a medium to long range orbit around your target. The DPS is 514.59. Now if you're using rapid missiles, you might think that the missile implants are going to make a big difference. Well, in reality there is not going to be a lot of difference, although if you don't have the drone bombs, then the missile implant is okay as well. But again, the drone bombs are recommended to use. Drone bombs are recommended to be used on this boat as well as the other Gurista pirate ships. Okay, let me quickly adjust the layouts. It doesn't take long, thankfully. Can I have a micro warp drive unit just to see how much speed I can get out of this little boat with the oversized missiles? And the worm does look kinda hilarious with the rapid missiles, although it looks very scary. Exactly 10,000 hit points. Now this is satisfying. Exactly 10,000. Not one above, not one less. Beautiful. Overall, wasn't my intention to get that number, but somehow I got the number, so not going to complain about that. 4.7 kilometers per second is the speed with the micro warp drive using the micro warp drive unit, and that's actually pretty fast. A solid speed boost. 27.35 kilometer range with the precision mode. Now the radius is 13.77. 21 kilometer is the base range of the rapid missiles. Now, since the ship has specific damage type bonuses, I recommend that you go and swap the damage type to be thermal or kinetic. That way you will get the extra damage boost out of the missiles. But as you can see, 514.59 DPS even when I change into the explosive missiles. But let me change into the thermal missiles. They will probably show a difference. Or okay, well, let me just do thermal missiles. Okay, it does work. For a second I thought that the missile implant was bugged. Okay, so you did get a decent boost from the thermal missiles. You will get the same boost from the kinetic missiles because that's the damage bonus that this ship has. Now, for a PvE build, you can go with a setup like this. It should work really well. Basically, Web, Nosferatu. Now I would use a scrambler against the elite NPC ships that you might encounter in the mission. And for that I had to remove the rapid missile launchers. However, if you use the Republic fleet missile launchers, then you will be able to fit a scrambler just fine, and that previous build also would work just fine. And I have a Nest 1 drone damage amplifier. And let's go back to the drone bombs. The drone bombs are, I would say one of the better implants nowadays, and I'm starting to prefer the drone bombs over the barrage implant, especially for PvP, especially on some of the ships like the Statius that can basically decloak right next to the target and basically unload like 5000 DPS into the target. That is very lethal, and I'll be honest with you, I expect that to be nerfed. I honestly do expect that to be nerfed in the near future. So if you have that implant, if you have that ship, well, take advantage of that, because perhaps that will be nerfed in the near future. Now the DPS increase it's okay. I'm not complaining about the DPS on this little boat. After all, the worm is definitely, I would say, good for PvE. All the Gurista pirates are actually really good for PvE. Okay, sorry for the weird cut. Had something to do on the main game for a second. So I'm orbiting at 0, going about 700 to, I would say, 1 kilometer per second. Although it's not really a perfect orbit. The ship is orbiting in an elliptical pattern. Although it does stabilize the orbit once the battle becomes prolonged. Now I'm trying to find a good frigate comparison with the Worm, although we currently at this moment don't have many frigates that use drones, and this boat is a hybrid between missiles and drones. Perhaps the closest boat is the Astro, because the Astro also uses drones. Although the Astro doesn't have any missile bonuses, the Astro is primarily not a combat ship, but a exploration boat. Although in some cases the Astro can be used as a combat boat. Although for that purpose the status fills that purpose much better. It's not a frigate, but it can do a really good job for PvP. For exploration, the Astro is kind of multi-purpose. Now, are there some things that I don't really like about the Worm? Well, honestly, its performance is okay. Definitely not a crazy DPS boat. However, I would actually argue about that, because the drone bombs can give you some really good auto damage, and if you don't pick the level 30 secondary, the remote reload, then you get a 300% bonus on total damage. So technically you can get the Worm up to 3000 DPS if it's a full-on glass build, and 3000 DPS on a frigate is actually really solid. Although on average with the bombs you have about 2000 DPS, and level 45 is really not necessary. Level 15, 20, 30 is more than enough, although most of my implants, except the barrage implant, are on level 15, and I don't really need to go above level 15 on most implants. It's more than enough. Maybe in the future, if I have a lot of ISK, then I might go and upgrade upgrade them, perhaps in the future, although I expect the implant's price for the upgrades to become lower as time goes on. On the parallel roadmap, there is I think in April or June, not really sure what month it was, but there should be a new dormant, and it does look like a new implant. Usually when they release a new implant, they release a new dormant, so I expect that I expect that
We're under attack.
be available in the very near future, which can be the next month. Although I have to say, it does speed tank really good. So the medium shield booster might be overkill, but you know, I like to make my builds reliable for a lot of different situations that might occur. Now with drone boats, you can easily do the 0 kilometer orbit against anything. Although in PvP, don't do a 0 kilometer orbit against Serpentis ships because of the webs, and Serpentis ships can easily kill most ships that get webbed, unless you can quickly burst down the ship with high DPS. Basically the same tactic that you can use against the Blood Raiders. So the same tactic can also be applied to the runboats with missile launchers. Don't have a problem to maintain a 0 kilometer orbit. For example, the Dramiel has to be used with a manual orbit in order to fully take advantage of the ship, because the turrets might have some issues with tracking at close range and other things like that. For example, with manual flying you can easily tackle long range targets, a spiral approach, a sideways approach. There is a lot of different manual piloting options that you can use. Now you can do the same thing with the worm, although it's much easier to orbit targets with the worm, because you just hit orbit and you let the drones and missiles do their job. After all, missile launchers and drones don't lose tracking if you are going or orbiting at a high velocity. So in that aspect, the worm is actually much more easier to fly. Of course, the DPS difference, the sustained DPS difference is there. So the same principle can be applied to this ship as well, which means the worm has its advantage, but at the same time the worm also has its disadvantage, so it goes both ways, and that's fine. There is no perfect ship in the game. Every ship has its advantage and disadvantage. And I think that's also that can also be applied to cruisers, battleships, even capital ships. However, one thing that is still the same is the way how battleships act when you orbit them at 0. All of them are spinning around, and a lot of pilots in PvP, when you do a 0 kilometer orbit around them, panic, and basically they don't know what to do. So you have that element of surprise at your side, especially if you are engaging someone in low sec. In low sec, it's actually very easy to catch targets. The only issue is the fact that there is thousands of stabs out there. Everyone has stabs, even the tier 5, tier 4 ships have like 7, 8 stabs. However, you will also encounter ships that don't have stabs. In the recent, I was actually very surprised. In the recent Valentine's events, where we have destroyed over 3,000 ships over the span of like 2 or 3 weeks, I was able to do solo PvP just fine. I didn't have a lot of issues with stabs, and I was actually very surprised because I expected to see ships with stabs left and right, but unfortunately,
We're under attack.
well, I say unfortunately, but fortunately that wasn't the case. I was able to hold most targets with one scrambler or dual scramblers, even with faction ships. So there are stabs, but at the same time there are regions that don't have stabs, and I think that players who came to our system from all the regions were the players who did not have stabs, but players within our region, in Galante or Cavalry, usually have a lot of stabs, and that has to do with the fact that the highest concentration of pirates is located in Galante or Cavalry. Meanwhile, the lowest concentration of pirates is located at Mimitar and Amar. So again, if you like to run missions, then I highly recommend that you go and try out Amar or Mimitar space. I still recommend everyone to check out the deep low sec systems. The deep low sec systems are actually really fun, and you will have a lot of I would say a lot of room to relax and play the game. You can run missions over there, you can run Inquisitor and Scout anomalies. A good Inquisitor or Scout, even low tier, or well, I say low tier, but tier 4, tier 5, can actually give you over 500 million if you get a good loot drop. So in low sec you have definitely a lot of very nice options, and you have let's say a lot of chances to make a lot of ISK. You just have to go into deep low sec where there are not as many pirates as in the well, if that's deep low sec, then what is the other low sec? It's definitely not shallow low sec. I don't know how to call it. Let's just call it basic low sec. The basic low sec that's near high sec is usually crawling pirates, while the deeper low sec is actually a lot safer, and you can actually enjoy the game over there. I actually had plans to go there and basically to live in deep low sec with my alt to basically test out my theory, although I have friends who basically tested the theory out and ended up working just fine. But I still haven't logged in my alt, although I have my alt unbanned. I have issues with my emulator because I had issues with my phone, and I basically had to install a new operating system, and that means I had to wipe everything that I had on the storage, and I have installed a new version, a newer operating system that's in some cases much better than the previous one, but in some cases it does suck in some aspects. For example, the emulator that I was using does not like Android 12 at all, so that's the problem that I have. Hopefully I'll be able to get my alt up and running. I still want to put my alt in deep low sec and live there for a while. Should be pretty interesting. So that's one of my goals, one of the things that I want to do. And of course the alt will be used for the classic tackle purpose. The primary use of my alt was to be a tackle for the revelation, and well, it was extremely successful at being a tackle. So successful in fact that it brought so much salt that it got banned. So let that sink in. But let's go back to the worm over here. I have been spinning around this Hyperion for a while, and you know, the worm and basically any faction frigate can easily run storyline missions as well. And I would actually recommend that you go run the storylines with smaller ships because it's much safer, much more difficult to catch, much more difficult to kill. You trade clear speed with survivability, and I've said this many times before, but I value survivability a lot more than raw DPS because you can have a million DPS. If your ship gets caught and if there is 3 Macarios dropping on your ship and you basically can't kill them, well, you are going to be dead. While with smaller ships, something like that to happen is much more rare, much more difficult because most pirates have poor scanning skills that I've noticed, and when they scan you get a scan notification, and when you get a scan notification you simply warp out. So that's why the smaller ships are fantastic in this game for that type of content and for that type of combat. Well then, that was a very lovely little run with the Worm. Overall, a fantastic little boat, and I really hope that I could help you at building your own ship. And with that being said, as always, I love you all. Fly safe, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.